with another one. While Shedeur Sanders is out there enjoying his hiking, the Cleveland Browns are now talking about Brendan Sorsby as far as the NFL supplemental draft. I'm going to give you guys the receipts of why this is not going to happen. We also have G. Bush speaking out about Shedeur versus Deshaun Watson.
The Cleveland Browns already know who their starting quarterback is going to be. They just can't say it yet. And the longer they stay quiet, the more clearly they're saying it. Here's what makes this strange. The man they keep publicly refusing to commit to just went viral hiking a mountain on his vacation. No helmet, no playbook, no sense of urgency at all. And yet, the entire city of Cleveland is losing its mind over a quarterback who isn't even in the NFL, who hasn't even applied for the supplemental draft, who is possibly still in rehab. Think about that for a second. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what Cleveland is doing. You're going to see the organizational signals they're sending before they make anything official. You're going to understand the psychological war happening inside that locker room right now, and you're going to see the one comparison from a game everyone watched that closes the Brendan Sorsby conversation permanently. Most channels aren't covering it from this angle. Let's fix that.
And you need to have, going into the season, the level of buy-in from your team and the coaches, right, so that they understand, like, this is the dude we're going to stick behind. We all saw the progression. We all saw the competition. Here's the guy. So I think they did exactly what they were supposed to do, because what you want is, if the narrative and the conversation was Deshaun Watson heading into these mini camps was going to be the starting quarterback, you still want Shedeur Sanders to do everything that you want him to do outside of the football.
Every franchise has a wound. A moment that doesn't just hurt, it changes the DNA of the organization. For Cleveland, that wound has a name: Deshaun Watson. Not just the injury, not just the money, though $230 million fully guaranteed will haunt this franchise for a generation. The wound is what it costs them in belief, in identity, in the ability to trust their own judgment about a quarterback. Because when you spend that kind of commitment on a man and then watch him throw 2 meaningful passes over 2 years while the team collapses around him, something breaks, not just on the field, inside the building. And now, Todd Monken is standing in that building, a new head coach, a man who inherited this fractured identity, this organization that still flinches every time someone says starting quarterback. That's the wound, and Shedeur Sanders is standing directly on top of it.
Same as what Mary Kay actually had to say, but after listening to Todd Monken, if he had an opportunity to voice his opinion, he would not want Brendan Sorsby.
Not at all. I mean, that's not even come across my desk. I don't think we're in a position to want to go down that road. That's my opinion. That's not Andrew's. And that, I like the quarterbacks that we have. I think that's a slippery slope when you go down that, irrespective of talent, right? In terms of the situation he's put himself in.
Watch how Shedeur Sanders carried himself through this offseason. While the Brendan Sorsby noise was everywhere, while Cleveland was being linked to a gambling addict who got expelled from Texas Tech, Shedeur was on a mountain, hiking, not anxious, not desperate, not performing hunger for anyone's camera. There is a version of a young quarterback trying to earn a starting job who checks his phone every hour, monitors the narrative, sends word through agents. Shedeur went hiking. That is a man who believes he already has what he came for. Todd Monken said something in public that most people treated as a political non-answer. He said, "That's not even come across my desk. I don't think we're in a position to want to go down that road." He wasn't talking about Sorsby's talent. He said, irrespective of talent. Read that again. When a head coach voluntarily removes talent from the conversation, that's not a football evaluation. That's a value statement. That is a man drawing a line around the culture he is building and telling you exactly what lives outside it. Andrew Berry, the GM, said what GMs always say: "We'll do our due diligence. We'll evaluate all options." Standard, safe, expected. But notice what Berry didn't do. He didn't push back on Monken. He didn't say, "We keep all options open." He let his head coach speak in absolute terms about character, about a slippery slope, and then offered nothing to soften it. Organizations don't make accidents like that. When a GM lets his coach close a door in public, it's because the GM already closed it in private.
This is a game that everybody watched. Primetime football game. Brendan Sorsby versus Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders beat Cincinnati 34-23. And if you guys want to say what that has to do with Brendan Sorsby and Shedeur Sanders, look at the stats. They both threw 30 passes. Shedeur Sanders had 323. Brendan Sorsby had 180. Case closed. Shedeur Sanders also had 2 TDs. Brendan Sorsby had 2. No interceptions, and same as Shedeur Sanders.
And then there's the game itself. Colorado versus Cincinnati. Prime time. The moment everyone pointed to as proof that Brendan Sorsby to play at a high level. Both quarterbacks threw the ball 30 times. Shedeur Sanders, 25 completions, 323 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brendan Sorsby, 16 completions, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. Same game, same opponent, same conditions. 143 yards of separation, 9 completion differential. Case closed, not as an opinion, as a receipt. Here's the question nobody's asking. When was the last time you watched a franchise spend a first-round draft pick on a quarterback and then spend the entire offseason doing everything possible to justify replacing him with a man who might not even be eligible to play in the NFL? Why is Cleveland even having this conversation if they're confident in Shedeur Sanders? Unless they're not confident in Shedeur Sanders. Or, and this is the other answer, unless the noise isn't coming from the organization at all. Let's talk about what's actually happening inside that building, because this isn't just football. This is identity. This is ego. This is the invisible war that every quarterback competition eventually becomes. Deshaun Watson is still in that building, technically, still on the roster, still collecting money. And when a man whose entire self-concept is tied to being a franchise quarterback, the guy, is suddenly in open competition with a rookie who's getting more buzz than he is, the body responds before the brain can process it.
Proving yourself to a new guy that hasn't seen you. So the first thing that they said they wanted them working on was the footsteps. The second thing they say they want to work with is getting the ball out quicker. They also wanted to see what he was going to do. It looks like he's more in shape. His body is transforming. And 3, how do you handle the competition? I like my guys to come in and feel like any given day, every single rep means something. Every single day you need to have an opportunity to get better. And I thought what you saw was, in the beginning, Deshaun Watson.
Jay Bush said something important. He said that in shorts, in drills, no contact, Deshaun Watson still looks like a quarterback, still throws with something extra, still has the physical hallmarks of the guy he used to be. But that's the most psychologically dangerous version of Deshaun Watson for Cleveland, because it creates ambiguity, and organizations die in ambiguity. Now watch Shedeur Sanders. The report from those coaching sessions is that he came in and did everything they asked. Worked on footwork, got the ball out quicker, got in better shape, handled competition. Every single item. A man with an external locus of control, someone who believes the outcome is happening to him, doesn't respond like that to a new coaching staff. He defends, he deflects, he talks about what he already does well. Shedeur checked every box. That is a man who believes he controls what happens next. And then there's the Sorsby question. Think about what it means psychologically that this is the conversation Cleveland is being drawn into. A supplemental draft candidate, a gambling addiction, a legal dispute, a player who isn't even eligible yet. Legitimate franchises don't get pulled into this orbit unless something inside the building isn't settled. The Sorsby noise isn't coming from nowhere. Noise like this fills the vacuum that uncertainty creates. Think about it from Shedeur Sanders' point of view for a second. You're a rookie quarterback. You outperform your competition in minicamp. You do everything the new coaching staff asks. You check every box publicly. And the city is still debating whether to replace you with a man who got expelled from college and is currently in rehab. That's not a football evaluation anymore. That's a test of character, of ego regulation, of whether you can play your game while the whole circus burns around you. And going hiking? That might be the most psychologically mature response Shedeur Sanders could have given. Here's what Cleveland is actually communicating, if you know how to read it. When Todd Monken used the phrase slippery slope, he wasn't talking about Brendan Sorsby specifically. He was talking about what kind of franchise Cleveland wants to become. He was drawing a line between teams that chase talent regardless of character and teams that build culture first. Slippery slope is not a football term. It's a culture term. When a head coach uses that language in a press conference about a quarterback he has never coached, a quarterback who hasn't even applied for the draft, he's not evaluating a player. He's issuing a statement of organizational values. Translation: we are not that team anymore. Andrew Berry's silence after that statement was equally loud. Organizations that are genuinely undecided let their GM offer counterweight. They let the front office preserve optionality in public while the coach handles the culture message. Berry didn't do that. He let Monken own the room, and then offered one sentence about due diligence that meant nothing and was designed to mean nothing. That's not indecision. That's management giving a head coach the floor to define who they are and endorsing every word of it. But to understand why this matters, we have to go back to that Colorado-Cincinnati game, because Brendan Sorsby wasn't just another quarterback in that matchup. He was being positioned by the media, by the hype machine, as potentially the better prospect coming out of that game. And Shedeur Sanders was playing in his brother's shadow, Deion Sanders' son, playing at Colorado in a program being rebuilt for television as much as for football. Every single piece of context suggested Sorsby was the underdog story, the grinder, the under-recruited kid who outworked everyone. And then the box score dropped. 143 yards of separation, 9 more completions on the same night against the same opponent. That was the moment the comparison should have ended. It didn't. And that tells you more about the NFL's hype machine than it does about either quarterback. 52 men are watching this quarterback situation play out, watching whether the organization commits or hedges, watching whether Shedeur gets a real runway or gets undermined by the front office's failure to shut down the noise. They traded Myles Garrett. They mortgaged one of the best defensive players in football because this front office decided it was time to build around youth. That transaction only makes sense if the youth at quarterback is real. If the Browns are still legitimately considering a supplemental draft pick, still genuinely open to Deshaun Watson starting, then the Myles Garrett trade is a confession that the plan was never as clear as they said it was. Locker rooms read organizational clarity before coaches speak a single word. They can feel the difference between commitment and cover. Right now, Todd Monken is saying the right things. The question is whether the organization behind him believes them. Here's the call. If Shedeur Sanders gets the reps, gets the protection, and gets the runway that every first-year starter needs, this team competes. They're not a Super Bowl team, but they're relevant. They're developing something real. If the competition stays manufactured, if Deshaun Watson's presence creates psychological interference for a young quarterback who is clearly the future, they go nowhere, and they go nowhere slowly. The supplemental draft talk isn't the threat. The threat is ambiguity. The threat is Cleveland doing what Cleveland always does, hedging at the exact moment they need to commit. 3 years from now, this minicamp, this summer, gets remembered as one of two things: the moment Cleveland finally chose a direction and trusted it, or the moment they let the noise in and paid for it every Sunday for the next 4 years. I open this by telling you Cleveland already knows who their quarterback is. They do. Monken told you. Berry confirmed it with his silence. The depth chart reflects it. The Myles Garrett trade demands it. They just haven't said it out loud yet, but they will. Because underneath all of it, past the supplemental draft noise and the Deshaun Watson questions and the political non-answers from front office executives, there is a young man who outplayed the competition in the same game, in the same conditions, on the same night, who showed up to minicamp and did everything a new coaching staff asked, who went on vacation and went hiking, not because he doesn't care, but because he's already earned the right to be calm. He's done everything he can do. Now it's Cleveland's turn to decide if they actually believe what they say they believe about him. So here's what I want to know. Is Shedeur Sanders the future of this franchise, or is Cleveland about to make the same mistake they've been making at quarterback for 25 years? Drop it below. I'll be reading every single one.